form. We will be calling people based on those forms. If you don't have a form, we will at that point ask you to fill it out and turn it in before you speak.
Okay. All right. Kim said that you had to speak straight into the microphone, and April needs 1 minute to set up.
Next item on the agenda is 329.24, adjournment to open meeting. Do I have a motion that the Board of Education adjourn to an open meeting? Okay, and motion support. Ms. Hines?
Dr. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Manning? Yes. Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Ms. Abby Mitchell? Yes. Ms. Hines, yes. Mr. Cox?
Yes.
President Gray?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, next item on the agenda is 330.24, which is citizens' comment on agenda items. I do have the, if I call your name and you are wishing to speak about a non-agenda item, kind of let me know. We'll move on to the next. Jessica West?
Non-agenda.
Okay. Jennifer Owens?
Non-agenda.
Michelle Sample? And just a reminder, we do have a 3-minute per person limit here. We will be keeping this section to the 30 minutes, but however, if we do not get to you during this section, we will call on you again at the non-agenda items where there will be no time limit, no overall time limit.
I know that should be 3 minutes.
I didn't start the time. I hope you're good.
Listen, I have a scooter, but I can't get back up.
There we go.
Okay, returning the agenda item 331.24, 1, 2, and 3, the county budget handout. I looked at them. They're very detailed, nicely, and easy to understand and read, and very clear. Who made and created these layouts? Last month there was a presentation was made by Brandon Walsh from Michigan Benchmark Board, and it was an in-depth discussion that the board had with them. I understood it. It was, in fact, I'm very grateful for it. But was this implemented for the report? If not created by the board, was this report, why was this report not shown 8 months ago? Excuse me. If this was not shown or created by Benchmark, and the board created this, the administration created this, why wasn't this given out 8 332.24, the supplemental pay agreement. Is this about for the interim superintendent? If the interim superintendent did a past job, is she doing 2 jobs? Is she only doing 1 job? What is going on with that?
Thank you, Ms. Sample. I believe your questions will be answered during the presentations. Dr. Karpinski?
A little backwards, sorry. Good evening. So I just wanted to tonight share some continued concerns on behalf of the MEA members that I represent. In regards to those concerns, as you are aware, the school year has completed and the teachers are still in the process of negotiations. When we received the amended budget at the spring board meeting, it stated there would be $7.1 million was what the amended budget was set to be. Tonight, I see in your proposed estimates, it's 3.6. When we stood here in this auditorium this winter, and Dr. Dignan addressed the community, staff, and students with his PowerPoint presentation, he stated how we would be having meetings, the stakeholders would be involved, there would be input, and at other board meetings, I have shared the obligation to ask the association's opinion for changes in program or other financial issues, and to report those opinions to the board for the Wayne-Westland EA contract. That has not occurred. Tonight, when we sit here and see an if-then scenario proposed of $10 million cuts or $17 million cuts, those cuts, according to the unions and our knowledge of them for these if-then scenarios, seem to be pulled out of thin air. And that's how the negotiations have been occurring. Every time we negotiate, we end up with more questions. The numbers change, the story changes. Yet we have 4 assistant superintendents and an attorney sitting across the table from us at every negotiation meeting. I would like to, because of that information, because of the continued lack of collaboration, transparency, and the continued surprises, remind this board of the vote of no confidence that we took in the leadership at the time back in December. We voted over 80%, 84% actually, of our MEA members voted no confidence in the then acting board president, Mr. Cox, the superintendent that you have put out on leave, and Dr. O'Keefe, the HR director. Want to remind you all that that vote still stands. This is just another example of why we have no confidence in the leadership in this district, and we implore you to fix it.
The next one I have is April Davelstein.
Non-agenda.
Non-agenda? All right, if anybody was wishing to speak about agenda items and hadn't turned in a sheet, if you can get one filled in and turned in, I will call upon you during the non-agenda item section. Seeing no other sheets turned in for agenda items, the next item is 331.24, which is review and approval of business service and finance. I believe Ms. Campbell will be presenting.
Can you hear me?
I think it just needs to start up.
Is that better? The first presentation that I have is the final budget amendment for the current fiscal year 2023-2024. And Moving past the cover pages, you will see the general fund in resolution form with notes and a side-by-side comparison to the mid-year amendment that was done a few months ago. Some of the changes to note, well, one thing that I should say is the general fund is supported by a levy of 17.4798 mils currently, which is less than our maximum of 18 mils due to heavy rollbacks currently in place. So some of the changes to note in revenue are at the state level. We're seeing a decrease of $3.3 million in revenue. That is due to the fact that our state aid comes from two sources, part of which is the property tax that we levy in our municipalities, and the other part is from our state aid foundational funds. When the Wayne County Treasurer's Office reported part of our taxable values in the Township of Canton to the state of Michigan, they underreported property tax values by $180 million. This wasn't something that the district had the opportunity to view. It's a report directly from the county to the state, and what we received in our taxable value reports was actually correct. So when the county underreports property values to the state makes up the difference in giving us additional state aid revenue. When this mistake was discovered at the state level, which was just last month, I did get a call that informed us that they would be taking back the overpayment over the next 3 state aid payments for this year. So May, June, and July. I'm sorry, 4 months, May, June, July, and August. So ultimately, that's a decrease in our state funding for pupil allowance of $3.3 million that was unexpected and sudden. Another change that you'll see in federal revenue is a decrease due to the fact that we were awarded a grant to replace wireless access points throughout the district, and we found out that that money will be paid directly from the E-rate organization to the vendor and won't flow through our revenues. If you look at other financing sources, that actually increased. Other financing sources refers to monies that we receive for various supports from Wayne-Reside. And so we actually saw an increase in those supports. And the fund modifications consists of indirect cost capture from grants. And what that is when many of our grants are budgeted, we're allowed to take a small percentage of expenditures and return that to the general fund, and that's based on overhead costs and so forth. And so our indirect cost capture appears to be a little bit less than what we thought it was going to be. Our beginning fund balance at July 1st was $9.24 million. And when you add our total expected revenue to that fund balance, you get $153,730 available to appropriate in our general fund. Moving on to expenditures, you'll see an increase in the basic programs for instruction due to unforeseen extra duty, extra pay, and additional severance payments that were above what was budgeted. We had a lot of staff that actually retired, resigned, so on and so forth, and most of our bargaining contracts have allowed for payouts of accumulated sick days and so forth. Also added needs, we're seeing an increase there, and that's for basically the same reason. The difference between basic programs, added needs, and added needs are basic programs is general education, instruction, face-to-face with the student, so that would be teachers. Added needs is special education programs that are charged to the general fund. Adult education, because there weren't any additional changes since the mid-year budget amendment. Moving down to support services, you'll see that pupil support, we're seeing an increase in that for much of the same reason. Pupil support can be things like student services, guidance services, our family resource center, nursing, hearing impaired, occupational therapy, physical therapy, psych, speech, social work, teacher consultants, special education, and student monitors. On the next line, instructional staff support, you see a decrease. We were able to find some additional grant money that we were able to reclass some of those positions into, and also there was some attrition that we did not replace positions as some of our staff left us. That category consists of curriculum, instruction, assessment, our media centers, instructional technology, and the supervision of instruction. The next line is general administration, and you see a decrease in expenditures there attributed to split allocations and reduced spending. That consists of the areas of the Board of Education, the superintendent and assistant superintendents, and grant procurement. Our school administration, you see a decrease there in expenditures, and again, that's attributed to reduced spending and attrition. And that category consists of everything concerning the office of the principal. So that would be principals, assistant principals, building secretaries, copiers, printers, office supplies, and so on. The next line, business services, you see a decrease in expenditures that we attribute to reduced spending and attrition, and that consists of not only our business office or fiscal services, but also internal services such as our mailroom, postage, stock, personnel. Moving on to operations and maintenance, I made no changes there because I didn't foresee any changes before the end of the year based on what the mid-year amendment brought forth. And transportation, the same, no changes there between the mid-year amendment and the final amendment. Central services consists of, you see a reduction there due to reduced spending throughout the year and attrition, and that consists of the communications department, personnel, non-instructional technology, support, and community partners. Next is support services, and you see a decrease there due to reduced spending and attrition. And though the categories that fall into that bucket are our music programs and our athletic programs. Music for middle school through high school, and athletics K-12. The next area of expenditures is community service, and you'll see a reduction in expenditures there. That is that's our senior center. We have no expenditures in facilities, construction, and improvements because we currently have a bond, and we have no expenditures in debt service because the fact that we have a bond means that we have a debt retirement fund, and all those expenditures fall into different funds. In fund modifications, you see an increase in expenditures, And that represents the state aid portion of our Act 18 reimbursement, which is within special education. You see a total expenditures of $150,129,000, and that is a slight increase over the mid-year amendment, which brings our revenue under expenditures to $5.6 million and an estimated ending fund balance of $3.6 million, which would be 2.4%. Moving on, slide please, moving on to the Special Education Fund. The Special Education Fund is our Act 18 program and is basically a fund where revenue equals expenditures. And so from the original adopted budget, our total revenue, well, our total program budget looks to be less than originally adopted. It's coming in at $20,695,000. And we have expenditures to match. And that would be for instruction, for support services that I mentioned above, under pupil support, and other support services. So like I say, the final year-end amendment, expenditure equals revenue, and the estimated fund balance at June 30th is 0, as it should be. Slide, please. The next fund is Federal, State, and Local Grants Fund. And again, this is also one that expenditures and revenue should be equal, and the fund balance should be 0 at the end of the year. Some modifications to revenue. We have less local revenue than was originally budgeted. We have more state revenue than was originally budgeted, and we have significantly more federal revenue than was originally budgeted. And that's because of, we were able to relieve the general fund with reclassification of K through 5th grade teachers into ESSER funds, our remaining ESSER funds, and that fit the requirement of addressing learning loss because we reduced those class sizes in those grades for that purpose. Other funding sources, as you can see, we did manage to procure another $2.1 million in additional grants since that original adopted budget. The total available to appropriate in our federal, state, and local grants fund is $50,340,000. Expenditures match. The basic programs significantly increased from the original adopted budget, and that's due to that ESSER reclassification, as well as support services, which actually decreased a little bit. But as you see, our expenditures equal our revenues, and our total fund balance at the end of the year is 0, as it should be. Slide, please. Our food service fund, actually our food service is financially self-sustaining, and our federal revenues went up just because we had increased participation this year. We do offer the free breakfast and lunch for all students, and we get federal reimbursements based on the number of meals that we serve. So we have an increase this year added to our beginning fund balance for a total available to appropriate in the food service fund of $8.6 million. Moving down to expenditures, we did have an increase in our expenditures. The more meals we serve, the more money it costs to serve those meals. And so that went up about $1 million. And then fund modifications, this is an indirect cost capture back to the general fund for $350,000 for total expenditures of $7.5 million. Our revenue under expenditures is about $287,000 for an estimated ending fund balance of $1,058,000. The reason our expenditures were a little bit higher in food services, we were able to replace a couple pieces of aging, failing equipment in our cafeterias. Slide, please. Our sinking fund has changed since original adoption. We actually levied taxes of 0.9944 mils for our sinking fund, and so I'm not sure why the original adopted budget had no revenue, but we did bring in $2.192 million in tax levy, added to a beginning fund balance of $4.339 million, for a total available to appropriate of about $6.5 million. This year, we did not have sinking fund expenditures. All of the work that we did that sinking fund is allowed to be spent on was actually part of our bond this year. And so we had revenue over expenditures of $2.192 million for a total ending fund balance estimated to be about $6.5 million in our sinking fund. Slide, please. Moving on to the bond fund. Originally adopted revenue of $39.7 million. I don't know why that was written into the budget that way, because we had already received Series 3 of our bond fund, and the only revenue that we have now coming in from bond is interest on investments, and that's looking to be, by the end of the year, about $1.689 million. We had a $50 million beginning fund balance added to that interest revenue, gives us a total available to appropriate of $52.3 million. Moving down to expenditures, we're estimating that by June 30th, we will have been able to spend $42.5 million of our bond money, which gives us revenue under expenditures of $40.8 million and an ending fund balance estimated to be $9.8 million at the end of the year. Slide, please. Here's our debt retirement fund. This is not far off from the original adopted budget. This is the fund where we levy 4.48 mils on our bond and collect tax revenue of $10.2 million to pay back those bond payments. Added to a $3.4 million beginning fund balance gives us a total available to appropriate of $13.6 million. And down in expenditures, our debt service payments this year to pay back the bond are $11,600,000 for a total of revenue under expenditures of $1.4 million and an ending estimated fund balance of $1.984 million. Slide, please. Our school activity internal special revenue fund. This is what we call our student activity accounts or internal accounts. And this is actually money that doesn't belong to the district, but we act as fiduciary for those accounts that are usually activity for clubs and sports and things within the district that students raise money for, get donations for, and then can spend on their individual club or sport or needs. Our final amendment looks like our local revenue sources are going to be less than originally budgeted at $1.1 million, adding to a beginning fund balance of $1.1 million for a total available to appropriate of $2.2 million. In expenditures, we're on track to spend about $1,024,000 by the end of this year, end of this month, for a total of revenue over expenditures of $91,000 and a total estimated ending fund balance of $1.14 million. And that brings us to the resolution page and a break in the presentation if the board has any questions.
Do you have any questions about the final amended budget for 2024-25 from members of the board? All right.
And I will say this is not the first time the board has seen this presentation, and we did go over several hours of questions the first time the board saw this. Slide, please. 3 times. Now we're going to review the original budget adoption for next fiscal year that starts July 1st and ends June 30th of 2025. Again, we are levying 17.4798 mills for our general fund, and that is short of the 18 mills that we're able to, are allowed to appropriate due to heavy rollbacks. Excuse me. This comparison is side by side to the budget that we just saw for the final year-end amendment. We're going to see a reduction in local revenue because we had an expiration of a rental agreement for our Marshall Middle School and won't be collecting that revenue this year. We're seeing an increase in state revenue based on a projection of 9,150 students at $9,858 per pupil. Those are just projected estimates. We're not sure what our FTE will be until after school's back in session and we have count day in October. And we're also not sure what our per pupil foundation allowance amount is going to be until the state settles their budget. But this $9,858 is an average of what is currently the executive branch's budget, the House budget, and the Senate budget. I took all 3 and averaged what their offers are.
Okay.
I'm keeping federal revenue the same right now because we don't have word of any changes. And other financing sources, again, that's the money from Wayne-Westland for various grants and things that we get money from them for. And as of right now, I don't have any changes to report for that. Fund modifications, we are seeing increased revenue due to an increase in the food service indirect cost capture because of the increase in their increase in the meals, in the participation of students, an increase in meals. Excuse me, it's allergy season. That gives us a total projected revenue for next year of $148 million. Add that to our estimated beginning fund balance of $3.6 million for a total available to appropriate of $151,743,000. And moving on to expenditures, as you can see, we have a significant increase in our instructional expenditures, and that is due to the K-5 teachers that we were able to reclass into ESSER this year. That ESSER money is gone, and so those reclasses are coming back into general fund. But also, we're losing some employees through attrition, and my notes here say less attrition of approximately 34 employees at approximately $130,000 per employee. But since I put this together, I also got additional information from our Human Resources Department about other cost savings based on an additional number of employees that were non-instructional. So you'll see the increase, but it's less than the amount that was fully reclassed out this current year. And some of our other grants are going to pick up some of the costs that were reclassed this year. We are able to disperse some of those into other grants. Our adult education, we are going to see a little decrease in expenditures there. And in pupil support, a small decrease there in expenditures, and again, that's student services, guidance offices, family resource center, nursing, and then all those special education specialties. In instructional staff support, we're seeing a significant decrease in expenditures there due to attrition, as well as we were able to do some reclassifications in that area into new grants. General administration, increase of about $80,000 in expenditures. And again, that's Board of Education, superintendents, and grant procurement. School administration, office of the principal, including assistant principals, secretaries, and all the expenditures that it takes to run a school office. We're actually looking at the same right now. We have an expired contract currently, and so far that's still in bargaining, so we don't have any changes there as of yet. Business services, a slight increase, and that is the existing contracts in business services are through next year and include steps and increases for all those staff. Operations and maintenance, increase there for those same reasons. Transportation, and a slight increase for cost of living or inflation on supplies and materials. Transportation, again, currently in a bargained contract that includes increases and steps. Central administration, a slight increase there for the same reason. Communications, personnel, non-instructional technology, support, and community partners. And then support services, again, a slight increase for those same reasons, and those are music and athletic programs throughout the district. Our community service is the senior center, and we don't anticipate any increase in expenditures there. Fund modifications, I brought down a bit, and again, that's the state aid portion that we receive of Act 18 reimbursement. And the reason I brought that down for the original adoption is because we have worked with Wayne-Westland to recalculate the way we request reimbursements, and it's going to be able to capture us more reimbursement money. And so that's going to be in our favor. So we see a total expenditures of the original adopted budget of $160.6 million for a total revenue under expenditures of about $12.5 million, and an estimated fund balance at June 30th of a negative $8.9 million, which would give us a negative 5.56% fund balance. Next slide, please. And this is a slide that just shows the board asked to put together what some different scenarios would look like. Scenario 1 is if we take no measures to save costs and the fiscal year 25 budget is as presented. You can see, like I stated on the last slide, we would have a deficit percent of fund balance. Scenario number 2 is if we implemented cost cuts that would save us $10 million, then we could end up with a final fund balance that's above zero. Scenario 3 is if we implement cost cuts of $17 million, we could end up with a fund balance of 5%. Scenario 4, if our enrollment remains fairly stable, as it is now at about 9,300 kids, and we do no cost saving measures, that would give us some additional revenue, and our percent of expenditures fund balance would be about -4%. Scenario 4 is if our enrollment remains fairly stable at 9,300 students, and if we implement cost cuts of 10 million, then we could see a fund balance of about 2%. And scenario, that should be 5 and 6. If our enrollment remains fairly stable at 9,300 students, and if we implement cost cuts of about 17 million, then we could end the year with about a 7% fund balance. Slide, please. Onto our special education fund, and as I said before, this is a fund for our Act 18 activity that will end up with a 0 fund balance. And as of now, the information that we have shows our total estimated revenue for Act 18 to be $20,800,000. And our expenditures are equal to that, with an estimated fund balance of 0, as it should be. Slide, please. Onto our federal, state, and local grants fund. For our original adoption, we're not seeing a whole lot of change except in federal, and that's because our ESSER is being reduced and other grants are being there's other grant reclassifications. So that gives us a total revenue of $25.4 million, and expenditures are the same, with that ending fund balance being 0. Slide, please. Onto our food service fund for next year. We are looking to probably have very little change at the local and state level. Federal, we're anticipating an increase in revenue, again, for increased participation. Our food service director has some plans set in mind to really work on increased participation for our free breakfast and lunch, and make sure that our children have more opportunities for those meals. So we have $7.65 million in revenue added to our projected beginning fund balance of $1.058 million, for a total available to appropriate of $8.7 million. And onto expenditures. The more meals we serve, the more it costs to serve them. So we're expecting our expenditures to go up to about $7.5 million. And fund modifications increase with expenditure increases. So we're calling that $400,000 for a total expenditure of $7.9 million. Revenue under expenditures of $250,000 for an estimated fund balance at the end of the year of $808,000. And it is recommended by the state that your ending fund balance in food service funds should not be more than an average of 3 months of your expenditures in that fund. And if it does exceed that, then they ask you to implement a spend down plan. And so we're on track there with the $800,000. We're looking right on target there. Slide, please. To our sinking fund. Our original adoption is estimated to be about $2.3 million, and that is based on increase in property values. So our total revenue, about $2.3 million, added to a beginning fund balance of about $6.5 million, and total available to appropriate of $8.8 million. Again, as of right now, we have nothing planned as far as sinking fund projects, because we'll be finishing up the bond this summer, and then we'll look into what other needs we have. But we will have $8.8 million in sinking fund by the end of next year with no projects planned. Slide, please. Our bond fund, again, we're significantly spending down our bond by June 30th, and that will significantly decrease our interest revenue. So we're looking at possibly $25,000 in revenue added to that projected ending fund balance of $9.8 million. Gives us $9.8 million to appropriate, and we're hoping to spend all that this summer after July 1st, and that will be the end of this bond series with a 0% fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. Next slide, please. Onto the debt retirement fund. Again, this is the fund in which we levy 4.48 mils, and that is to pay back our bonds. So we're looking at revenue next year of about $11.2 million, added to our beginning fund balance of $1.9 million, for a total available to appropriate of $13 million, and expenditures of about $11.75 million, revenue under expenditures of $500,000, roughly $500,000, with an estimated ending fund balance of $1.4 million. Slide, please. And our last fund, again, is our school activity or internal funds. And based on this year's activity, we are setting an original budget of $1.2 million in revenue, added to our beginning fund balance of $1.1 million, for a total available to appropriate of $2.394 million. And for expenditures, based on this year's activity, we are predicting $1.1 million in expenditures, revenue over expenditures of $100,000, and an estimated ending fund balance of $1.294 million. And slide, please. That next page is the resolution page, and that brings us to another pause in the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Do you have any comments or questions from the board? Ms. Smith?
Thank you. Mrs. Campbell, during our meeting, during our finance committee meeting, is that better? During our finance committee meeting, we talked about the scenarios, so I'd like to go back to the scenario slide, please. And I just want clarification for scenarios 1, 2, and 3 in regards to enrollment. Because
That
is what would that enrollment be for 1, 2,
1,
and 3?
2, and 3 would be if our enrollment stays as in the original budget adoption of 9,150 students.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Cable. If the millage that we've been discussing is adopted, will that go into effect during this year, or will that be the following school year? Will that go in, will we get half the year, or?
So if the voters approve to reinstate our 18 mills and capture Inkster's taxable values, we would be able to issue a new levy in December that will capture the difference between the 18 and the 17.9 something mills on our general fund, and in all our municipalities, and capture a half year in Inkster on our debt retirement and sinking fund in general fund. So yes, it would be an increase in revenue this year if that passes.
And I just have a quick question. So with the 2024 fund balance in 2.40 and the projected 2025 negative 5.56, and with the school district, we don't generate funds like that. So I'm really concerned, moving forward, even with this budget. So with this, we still have time to negotiate and recalculate certain things before we make our enroll, or what's the situation with the negative 5.56?
Yes, this is actually looking a year ahead, and we can take measures during the school year to save money, and we will do a mid-year amendment and a final amendment to get current on any changes that we make throughout the year, or any changes that are presented to us throughout the year that should be made changes to the budget.
And I just have one more question, in regards to enrollment. Definitely, I know we are in a budget crunch, but we do have to spend some type of money to recruit, more students to our district. So will it be any type of negotiation when it comes to that, to increase some of the funding to entice more students to come to Wayne-Westland? Because that does, calculate how much we have in our fund balance, according to the students that we have.
We actually do have in our communications department, which is down there under central services, we do have a budget that we have for marketing purposes for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any other question? All right, Campbell, we'll go ahead.
Thank you. And then the last page, one of the things we talked about at Finance Committee is the possibility of taking out a state aid note. And what a state aid note is, it's borrowing against our future state aid in order to make, to be able to pay our bills in months where we don't receive state aid, where we're going to fall short if we don't see that revenue. And so I was asked to put forward, actually it was asked to be a flow chart, but there was so much information that the flow chart got really clogged up, and so I did a timeline. And this is on the last slide, timeline of state aid note borrowing activity. So typically in May, the business department selects note counsel, and that's an attorney who must be recognized by what they call the Red Book, or the Bond Buyers Municipal Marketplace Directory. And that is a compilation of state aid or note counsel that is put together by the Michigan Treasury. The business office completes the state aid note application. The business office completes Form 4384A and the cash flow workbook, which is a very extensive workbook that records all of your revenues and expenditures each month for 14 months, and then determines where your lowest cash on hand is going to be. And then you take that month and break it down into weeks to determine what your lowest cash on hand week will be of the entire year. And that's the amount of money that you would request in a state aid note. So what would happen is in our August state aid, they would advance us some of our money, and we would have time to use that. For example, September this year, we don't get state aid in September. We get our state aid 11 months of the year, and September is the month we don't get any state aid. However, our district just happens to have 3 payrolls that month, and so our cash would be a little thin. So the note counsel also prepares a borrowing resolution for the board, and the resolution just states that the board would approve a state aid note in an amount not to exceed. And that amount should be a liberal amount, so that while the legal counsel and the business office is working on the cash flow workbook, we have time to get that nailed down with a final number before it goes to Treasury on July 2nd. So in June, the board adopts the borrowing resolution. The business office compiles the application, the form 4384A, the cash flow workbook, and the borrowing resolution, and forwards it to the note council. Need for borrowing. Looks like some of my text got cut off there. Apologies. Determine the need for borrowing. Then in July, the note council submits the package to MFA, or Michigan Finance Authority, on the district's behalf. MFA emails purchase contracts to the business office. The business office signs 2 original contracts and forwards one to note council. The business emails a signed purchase contract to MFA. And in August, our note council submits the signed closing documents to MFA. They hold a pre-closing with MFA and then a closing. And the closing is where the note proceeds are wired to the district as part of the August 20th state aid installment. In September and beyond, the board and the district continue to work toward deficit elimination and a healthy fund balance. And our board policy says we should work toward 10% fund balance. Then in May of next year, the business office determines if we would have a need to borrow again, and the goal is to borrow less or not at all. And by completing the form 4384A and the cash flow workbook, that can be determined. If there is still a need for borrowing, the business then completes the state aid note application, and note council prepares a borrowing resolution. And if there's no need for borrowing, we skip to August of 2025. But if there is a need for borrowing, we go to June, where the board adopts the resolution, business compiles the application packet, and note council reviews the packet. In July, if there is a need to borrow, the note council submits the package to MFA. MFA emails the purchase contracts to business. Business signs and forwards to the note council and emails a signed copy to MFA. Then in August, if the need to borrow still exists, note council submits those closing documents to MFA. MFA performs their pre-closing, and the prior state aid note is deducted from, and the new state aid note is added to the August 20th state aid installment. If no need for borrowing exists, the prior state aid note is deducted from the August 20th state aid installment. And that would be the end of that process.
Hey, Campbell, do we have any questions from any members of the board? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is 332.24, review and approval of human resource items.
Good evening, board and community. I am recommending the Board of Education approve human resource item 1 as presented under separate cover, which is supplemental pay agreement.
And if there's any question, that is the item that I passed out a little bit ago. You received that in your email, I believe, a few days ago. Do we have any questions? Mr. Neal?
More in the form of comment, I'll be voting no on the issue, not because I don't think that Ms. Curry would do a fine job, but I object to the fact that we're paying for an acting superintendent when we're already paying for a regular superintendent, and for, we've already discussed my feelings in our closed session about how I feel about that. So I'll be voting no.
Any other comments? All right, do I have a motion to approve human resource item 1 as presented?
So moved.
Do I have support?
Board.
All right, Ms. Hines, take the call roll.
Dr. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Hines, yes. Ms. Abby Mitchell? Yes. Mr. Neal?
No.
Mr. Cox?
Abstain.
Okay. Ms. May?
Yes.
And President Gray?
Yes.
So we have 5, 1, and 1. Motion passes.
All right, next item on the agenda is 333.24, superintendent's comments. Ms. Curry.
Thank you and good evening. I would just like to say an extra thank you to Ms. Campbell for presenting our budget. Although the news is not favorable, we now understand our district situation and have time to process. I do appreciate everyone's patience for coming out today to listen to the budget, and I look forward to collaborating on our next steps. Thank you, President Gray.
Thank you. Next item is 334.24, citizens' comments on non-agenda items. I do have a few sheets here. If anybody else is still wishing to speak and hasn't turned into a sheet, please do so at this time. I do see we have one more down there. The first person we have is Jennifer Owens. Just make sure if you need to move the mic.
I'm sorry, if you could give me.
We can't.
No.
It's not. It's not.
Okay, try to.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Try to open the button one more time, so the lights just came on here, so.
Hello?
No.
We have help coming. There we go.
There. I'm sorry, now, bear with me for just a moment, I'm reading a statement that was made.
I can't hear.
I
Still can't hear. Sorry, can't.
Okay, I am going to be reading a statement tonight, if you do, just give me one moment to pull that up, from a teacher who wished to remain anonymous.
Okay.
Okay. This is from a teacher who wished to remain anonymous but reached out to me and asked me to read this statement for her. The special education department is in ruins and will only be worse in the fall. In the fall, the cross-cat room that used to exist in middle school will no longer exist. This means that kids who are going to be placed in these rooms, or who were already placed in these rooms, will be put into cognitively impaired rooms or emotionally impaired rooms for those kids who fit neither. They are being dumped back into general ed, some with a para. These kids barely survived elementary school. Parents were promised the cross-cat room, but the special education department has closed that option. 2 more social workers have announced they will be leaving on Friday of this week. We cannot afford to have any more of our staff voluntarily leave this district, because as staff leaves, students leave. A budget was prepared based on a number of students that we anticipate are going to be in our school district. I can guarantee you from the numerous parents I've spoke to over the last 8 months, that number is going to drop dramatically. Hamilton just found out that they are getting 2 emotionally impaired rooms. The special education department, as well as the board, need to understand the toll these types of classrooms put on schools. Center-based rooms are found all over the district. Each one is under-supported, taxing the already stretched resources of the school. If these classrooms are to be added, more para and administrative support must be given. If you don't know what unsuitable placements and understaffed programs can do to a school's climate for all kids, not just the kids in the classrooms, it's a nightmare where no one is learning their education. There is a complete lack of respect or regard for special education staff by their supervisors, and it's only going to get worse. More will leave for better districts with more manageable caseloads, ethical practices, common respect, and of course, the stable and better income. You need to be very concerned. The board needs to meet with the union department heads and the directors of the special education department and get a handle on these poor decisions. The board needs to be aware of the multiple and daily staff injuries reported due to students and repeated behaviors not appropriate for the settings they are currently in, and for sure not the settings they will be in the fall.
They are not best for the kids, they are not safe for the kids. I have 34 seconds left, and I would just like to touch base also with these concerns by this teacher as well as several other people in this district. The change of curriculum is a problem. I urge you to please investigate our staffing throughout the district. As we are trying to find budgetary cuts, I urge you to start from the top at central office and make cuts where they need to be cut. Creative positions are no longer needed. They were never needed in the first place, and they are at $200,000 plus salaries per year. This is hurting our district financially. Please do the right thing.
Good evening, Jessica West. Sorry, my notes are a little chaotic this evening. There's a lot of information there. So I want to start with, obviously there was the notification about placing Superintendent David on administrative leave. So I want to bring up that there is a community petition for lack of confidence, similar to what the union is talking about. Our concerns are specifically fiscal mismanagement, operational mismanagement, as well as backdoor deals, including with some members of this board. We believe that Superintendent Dignan should be investigated. In fact, we were cut off on the public comment period last time, otherwise that would have been brought up in more full force. Regarding some of the presentations today, I want to hit on a couple of things. You didn't define what operations and maintenance covers. I would love to hear a better definition of that, because it is a very large sum of our budget. Why haven't we sold unnecessary property such as Marshall School while we're still paying for things and we're getting increased costs as a relation to that? I'm sure that there are other properties as well. Staff resignations and retirements are not unforeseen, period. They are foreseen. They are caused by this mismanagement of this school district. They have caused, you're not actively saving money, which is what it seems to be the presentation you're trying to make. You're actually losing critical staff and resources. There were additional accounting errors that were brought forth in this presentation showing that we didn't account for things properly in this last amendment, or we didn't put numbers in the right columns again. So let's pay attention to that, please. I could show you the circles on the paper here. These scenarios are great that we've outlined. $10 million from where? $17 million from where? We could talk numbers all day long and put hypothetical things out in the air, but until we create a plan that says how we're going to do that, we're not going to get anywhere. And I understand that this is step one, and I have to say, hallelujah, 8 months later, we get numbers on a piece of paper that we can understand. We just have to provide them to us. We shouldn't have to beg for FOIAs. We shouldn't have to put a superintendent on administrative leave in order to provide the reports that already exist within our accounting department. I want to take my last couple minutes. I have so much here. Special education is an issue. You saw my 8-year-old daughter speak at the last meeting about what it looks like to not have enough support in the classroom. If they lose social workers, if they lose school administrators, if they lose paraprofessionals in this process, we aren't going to be able to care for the kids that we do have, and that is a really big issue. So we have to start talking to the people that are behind us and the directors and the people that are in the schools and figure out where we can make those cuts and where we cannot. I'll yield my 5 seconds.
April Devilsing.
Good evening, board. My name is April Scheffler. I am a resident for 30 years in this district. I am a parent of 2 kids that graduated in this district, one of them being special needs. And now I have been a para in this district for 15 years. As I said, one of my children was special ed. My husband had multiple job offers in other states. I refused to go because my daughter needed care that I found out other states were not giving their students. Now, it seems now, instead of the students, we're more worried about the paper pushers in this district than the ones that are working hard, hand in hand with our students. Over the last 9 months, I've been to several board meetings, and I'm tired of the comments from the board after our discussions are open of your comments. And then you get mad at us because we comment back to you. No, the problem will not work itself out, as one person said, because you know what? We need those hands-on with our students. You're talking about having 9,150 students projected for next year, and you're hoping you projected for 9,300. You're not going to get them if situations are not resolved. I know of 3 students right now that are pulling out because their daughter is not going to be represented in special ed. Because like I said, to hear that rooms are closing, this child would not survive in general ed. She barely made it the last 2 years. But given the hope, her parents were given hope, now that hope was taken away from them. And these kids are not going to be prepared. You're giving us paras, into a job where those kids can't cope, and then we have to figure out. You don't give us training how to help that child make it through her day when she can't understand what the teacher just told her to write. But you guys aren't worried about their education. You're just worried about if they're having tantrums. Students that are below their grade level should not be put in general ed classes when they have that they're under there for a disability. And it was not just one person that got us here today, it was multiple. So you might have gotten one person out of here, but multiple people need to get out of here. As you heard at one of our meetings, we're not educated enough to know a budget. As you heard Ms. West say, she circled where budgets were understood.
Thank you. Noel West?
I gotta say one thing. This district needs more parent volunteers. Because when I was in elementary school, we had nothing. Nope. We had not one volunteer. Former student, by the way. That's all I have to say.
Noel West?
We can't hear.
I'm here to talk about the AP classes and the music classes. There's been a lot of talk about busing over classes like choir to, like Wayne's choir to Glen. And I just want to know what we're going to do about this because I don't think this will actually work. It is taking important time out of your learning classes to bus over. And what if they're traveling or something? You're taking out 10 to 20 minutes of class time every single day out of AP classes that have a strict plan. Sorry. They have a strict plan of how you should be learning things and when. Taking 10 to 20 minutes out of these classes every single day to transport between schools will make these students suffer, and that is not something that our school district can really afford. Are we still planning on combining some kind of like orchestra classes with like the younger 6th grade students along with the 8th grade students? This causes a problem because students that are just learning are being put with students that have been playing for 3 or 4 years. This is going to put students behind, and it could bring back our music programs. I wanted to know why we offered AP classes online and then randomly decided to take them away and say that we could not offer them. When I was putting what classes I wanted to take next year, it was offered that I could take AP classes online, like AP statistics, those kind of things. And then all of a sudden we were told these are no longer going to be offered and that we had to find another class. I just want to know why this was taken away. The music and AP programs are very vital to our school and they help make what our school is. So I'd just like some thoughts to be put in when these decisions are being made, just to know how important they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brief comments here. I will say that some and most of those numbers that were in the presentation, the community have been asking for, we have to accept because there is nothing to dispute what was shared. At the presentation, they gave a projection from 2 years up and out. You guys only did this current and what's the future. Maybe last year's combined, let's see the growth and or deduction. That would have been appreciative. Will the superintendent search be an open process for the community to be involved in the search? Will the board have the regular summer retreats for this, for goal setting and for planning? Will these also be open forum? And when will these dates be planned? There's been a lot of closed door meetings and I feel that the community, if it's going for the superintendent, I've been involved in the last 3 superintendent forums. I've given comment. What I have said has not been taken into account. What is the timeline for the state to come in and help with the district with this budget? I know that there was a presentation on that. I cannot recall when it exactly was at this time, because between January and now it's been mixed together in my mind. But I know that you were talking about the state coming in and having a controller take over. Is it still on the table? I've said multiple times that there needs to be one board and one voice. January, at the board retreat, the topic overall was teamwork. For those members that were there and engaged in the retreat, I thank you for trying to keep that in mind throughout these past harsh months. Also, I would like to say personally that the current president, who was stepped up and doing a good job, you stepped into a
numbers need to be factual. You guys talk about transparency and teamwork. I have not really seen it. If there are gonna be retreats for this summer, please notify somebody before 18 hours ahead of time. If you guys have media, put it out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any other forms for citizens' comment. The next item on the agenda is 335.24, review and recommendations, Board of Education. We'll start with Ms. Abney Mitchell.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
I just want to say thank you to everyone that spoke. Your opinion is important to us. I know as a board member, I value it. And being a student of special needs myself, I understand the needs that the students need. When it comes to classrooms, we do not make any decisions about the classroom. When we find out a class is being cut, a teacher is being cut, it's brought up to us here. So we don't have the information. You guys know before we do. But keep on coming, keep on telling us, keep on making us accountable to you. We have not had a budget in a year. So for the last 11 months, we have also been waiting on the process, waiting on the budget. Now we can move forward knowing what we know. I appreciate you guys, I appreciate your comments. And I'm gonna talk to whoever I need to talk to about the classrooms. And thank you, have a good evening.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'll start with one board, one voice. In the past, I know that we've been criticized for everyone just voting the same way. So I hope that you allow us to have a difference of opinion on some items. These things that have occurred over the last several months are pretty hot issues. A lot of discussion about what's right and what's wrong. And you're not going to find us all thinking the same way. You look at our budget, everyone says they understand it, it's easy to read. Well, what you have in front of you is a summary. We can read that too. It's pretty easy to read. But even in this summary, you see numbers. You don't have any way to verify them, just like we don't really. You know, if it says there's a deficit, I guess there's a deficit. If it says there's a surplus, like it used to be a $15 million surplus, we trusted that that person was telling us the truth. And without going through the budget line by line, which this is not, and having the background to be able to understand that, it would be difficult. But here we are. A long time ago, it seems, almost a year ago, we discovered we had a big problem. And it took us months to even figure out how big a problem, and even longer to figure out any solutions. As many of you here, all of you here probably realize that there was a plan brought forth to try and cut our budget. I mean, we have a budget that's 93% people as far as the cost. So the presentation involved layoffs. People felt bad about that. People felt threatened by that, and I don't blame them. There was a large turnout, and the board backpedaled, if you will, did nothing. And in the interim period of time, as you all have witnessed, we've not really done that much. I mean, we talk about it, we keep saying we're looking at a number, waiting for a number, but we really haven't done that much. The last meeting that I was not present at was June 4th, and it was a workshop. And I was out of state, so I wasn't there. There was nothing on the agenda about putting Dr. Dignan off on leave or finding a new superintendent. There was nothing on that agenda. But during the closed session, apparently, the board that was present came to that conclusion. me personally, because I don't believe in, one board, one voice all the time. I felt that due process was a little bit shy. I mean, if you imagine yourself working for anybody, and they come up to you like 20 minutes before they're going to vote, that tell you that, hey, we're gonna vote you out of here, put you on leave for these reasons, you might feel there wasn't a lot of lead time. I mean, what about due process? Now, it might come out the same regardless. I'm not really saying that everyone has to vote to change that. What I am saying is due process is important for everybody. I mean, the unions work really hard to make sure their contracts have a due process that's spelled out. You got a problem, you go through steps. If someone's going to be terminated, you go through steps. I personally felt that it was rushed. I personally felt that there was not really openness. I brought up a couple of meetings ago the word transparency has all different meanings depending on who's using it. But the vote was in an open meeting at which there was nobody. I mean, except the staff. I'd rather have it discussed, brought up, and come to an open meeting like this. Whether you're for or against that decision, that would have been more due process in my mind. And that's the way I think all people should be handled. So, for that reason, you won't see me supporting a lot of things in regard to this without some further discussion. I don't believe that people should be pushed out the door without being able to discuss the problem, negotiate the problem. And I know that's going to come now, but again, where was the rush? I know a lot of you are happy about it. This is not a discussion, this is really my time to talk. A lot of you are not that upset that this happened, but the fact is, we've done more to stop progress in the way of a plan than anybody. And that's my feeling.
Ms. May?
I just want to say thank you all for coming out. Thank you for always expressing your opinions and letting us know what it is that you need and holding us accountable, as Mrs. Abney stated. And again, I just want to say thank you and have a great evening.
Mr. Cox?
Thank you. We're certainly at a pivotal time in our school district. Excuse me. Up until this point, in spite of suffering through 40 years of not being funded as our neighboring school districts were funded, no Board of Education has ever presided over a deficit fund balance. In spite of the challenges that they had over the years, they always made the decisions, very tough decisions, that needed to be made so that we maintained our fiscal solvency. It was essential to the health of our school district and the health of our community, because maintaining our fiscal integrity is what allows us to borrow money at a bond price that's affordable. Recently, our bond rating was lowered as a consequence of our not being able to meet our financial obligations. And make no mistake, though the superintendent has been put on administrative leave and essentially blamed for this, the superintendent can't spend any money that's not appropriated by the board. A year ago, the superintendent made it very clear through the finance department that if we didn't make decisions, we weren't going to be in a position a year from then to get out of this problem. We had ESSER money back then. We had the advantage of being able to make some fiscal moves. We have a $150 million budget, and that does allow us some opportunities. But sadly, because of our inaction as a board, and I mentioned this before, our opportunities have gone by the wayside. Now someone came up and they talked about how many students we're projecting we're going to have next year. The actions of the school district board over the last year aren't such that they're going to attract people to our community. And the idea that the state of Michigan is going to come in and help the Wayne-Westland Community School District, I assure you folks, that's not what they do. What they're doing right now, they have us under a special agreement. They're sitting back and they're waiting to see if the board has what it needs to have in order to make these tough decisions and get ourselves out of this problem. The first time in 40 years we're receiving the same money as every other district, and it's also the first time we're going to be in deficit if we don't make those decisions. And make no mistake, they will come in and they don't care what contracts are for anybody. Teachers, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, or administrative staff. They are going to make the necessary decisions. And at that moment, you will cease to have a board elected by the people. You will have the state making the decisions. That is not in the best interest of our community. I agree with Mr. Neal. It has been very difficult to act in unity with other board members when I've seen this happen before, and I know how destructive it is, but we really do need to do that now. As I see it, we've got somewhere between $12 and $15 million we have to find right away in order to get back on top of this and be in control of our district. And when we do that, it's going to be tough. And because 92 to 93% of the money that we take in goes to the salaries of people, all of whom are important to our mission. That's where the money has to come from. We just don't spend it anywhere else. That means people are going to be moved. That means people have to be laid off. And if we don't do it, it's going to happen anyway. So the only decision we really have is, are we going to be the board that does it, or are we going to sit back and allow the state to do it for us? I'm in favor of us working together to make those tough decisions. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to congratulate the class of 2024 who were able to participate in the graduation. It was an amazing event. Definitely, we were able to also participate, some of the board members, on end of the year activities with some of the schools, so that was really nice. I just wanted to say one thing. I've been on the Wayne-Westland Board of Education for over 10 years. When I got on the board, like sometime 2013-14, we were at a fund balance of 4%, and we were actually in danger of this, situation with the state and treasury department. At one point in time, not too long ago, we had like a surplus of 24%. So we had that for quite a few years with no issue. So the fact that, this year we're ending at 2.4%, and then next year negative 5.56 is quite disturbing. I mean, it's really, how do you lose so much money in 1 year? Definitely, as a Wayne-Westland community, I was a parent, I was a student, I graduated from Wayne Memorial. My son, we had, issues with the, being special needs as well, so I definitely understand the importance of the classroom and these relationships when it comes to our principals, the teachers, our support staff, even our custodians and bus drivers. We're all a community, we're a family, we've always been a family, we're Wayne-Westland strong, and we definitely can get through this. I'm always thinking outside of the box, and there's certain things we can do. Like I've met several meetings about getting with our legislators to bring back the Wayne-Westland language that we had some years ago, where we were able to get an additional $7 million a year with the shortfall when they had what Proposal A did not have. Definitely talk about we have a planetarium in the district that we can use for the community to bring additional funds that we have. We spend a lot of money for it to sit in there. Definitely try to see if we can sell Marshall. We have a building there that we need to try to get off the market. We have transit buses that we need to sell. We need to see what we can, sell off. Maybe even rent the swimming pools out to the city of Wayne and Westland for the summer, for additional funds. An employee brought back taking our print shop and getting it out to the business community to get additional funds. We were able to go to Capital Woods and tour their school district, and they have a print shop, and they're making money from business owners, and to help increase funds in their district and other outside of the box business incubators, other ways to make money. we can lease the buildings out. I used to go to a church at Johnson High School Merged Community Church. They have churches here, community groups, sororities, fraternities, to lease some of the building out for, you know, different community groups. That's additional funds. And then too, what I'm concerned about is, you know, with the village coming up, the Headley Village, if we don't pass that 18 mil, we're gonna be losing $500,000 a year. So this is very concerning. I mean, you know, I just, at the same time, you know, there's a lot of consternation on this board. And a lot of times it's not about feelings, it's about what's doing what's right. And we have to move in a new direction because what's going on is not gonna work. Because at the end of the day, even with the state, it's not always doom and gloom. They are here to help us get out of the situation. So, I mean, we can't continue to keep doing things that got us there in the first place. And the problem was we were not getting the exact information. So to sit there and say the board did nothing, that's not true. As a board member, we have to be fiscally responsible. So we cannot vote on things if we don't have an accurate number and an accurate budget. It's important to, you know, listen to the community. We are elected by the community. We are elected by the, you know, the parents. We have to, our due diligence with the students. I really feel bad about the students with the AP and the music department. I don't understand why you just can't maybe do, have a class at Glenn, a class at Wayne, do virtual, have a teacher come at Glenn one week, have them come at Wayne the other week, and it just, you know, just switching off because driving the kids back and forth is dangerous. Again, you know, you don't want to, you got those rival school situations, and at the same time, if you're complaining about the buses and trying to privatize them, what sense does it make to take the kids back and forth on the buses? That makes no sense to me. So, you know, in the future, we will get through this. I definitely want to work with the community like we should have done before, the staff. People want to make this work because we don't have a choice, and we have to make our payroll. And again, you know, Wayne-Westland, I will always love Wayne-Westland. It's an amazing district. We are Wayne-Westland strong. We will get through this, and we just have to work together as a community because, again, when I joined the board, we were at 4%, and we got all the way up to 24%. So just in the future, like I said, we definitely have to move in a new direction. Again, we cannot operate a budget in a negative 5.56. That's just unacceptable from almost $24 million, and we have contracts going on. So, and we've lost some amazing staff that's been here for years and years and years. And I'm not going to privatize transportation because the district is too big. That's chart, see who we have, what we don't have. Maybe we need to reclassify certain positions. We have to maybe, you know, see what works best with the district. But, you know, in the future, we can get through this. But, you know, we can't be having all this bickering back and forth on the board. We have to move things forward because if not, I mean, I grew up in the city of Inkster. They lost their school district. This is not a joke. This is really serious. And we affect Wayne-Westland, Dearborn Heights, Romulus, Canton, and Inkster. There's a lot of communities that is affected by the school district. So, you know, thank you guys for coming out. I mean, we have to make some tough decisions, but I'm an outside of the box type girl. And just even some of those suggestions that I put out there, maybe we should look into those. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to strongly disagree with some of the characterizations of some board members as to what was the rush with our superintendent. I have to parse my words here because of how we move forward. We don't want that kind of consideration to get into the negotiations. We were promised that our superintendent would go out into our community, a road show, if you will, to move our district forward, to hear what the community had to say, to bring their ideas to the table. That did not happen. So when we talk about where was the rush, there was no rush at all. We have not received the promise that was made to us that we were going to get information for the last year, we have pleaded for information and have been given none. And so it was the appropriate time to act. There was no rush. Just because certain board members at the meeting, that's not my fault. Yeah. And that's not anyone else's fault except the board. I'm going to be as transparent as I can. I am a scenario 6 kind of guy. We need to fix this, fix it now. But the community must understand that we cannot correct our financial situation on the backs of our employees. We've done and gone as far as we can go with that. Now it's time to be looking at programs, and when you look at programs, it was mentioned tonight, you know, special education and this and that and the other thing. We're here now, and this is going to hurt. It's going to hurt before it heals. And as far as students leaving the district, and people come up here like it's a mass of students that are going to leave our district, I don't know what the future holds, but I certainly know that if we don't work together, starting right now as a board and a community, that I don't blame them. This has got to, I'm not sure I want to say that. We all have different opinions. But the bottom line is that finances are something that you can pull into place, and I believe that we should be doing that now. Thank you.
So I first want to thank Ms. Campbell for spending the last week dealing with a lot of questions from the board, going through what you saw here today, line by line, and answering our questions about why some numbers went up, why some went down, what they meant, what was included in those numbers. I know there were questions from the audience about, you know, what that was. There was a question from a fellow board member, a comment that we don't know what that means. And I feel Ms. Campbell has done an excellent job this past week helping us know what those meant. But I also want to thank Ms. Curry for stepping up this week. I know this was kind of thrust upon you, but you know, I feel that we've had productive dialogue, and I want to thank you again for rising to meet this moment. The board previously issued a statement regarding the leadership transition in the district. And we do recognize that we have significant work ahead of us as we explore the pathways that will return the district to financial health. Multiple other districts around the state are struggling with the complexity of these issues as well, and they have already put out plans, many of them, to fix their issues. The board, though, does remain, and I believe I can say this for all those up here who I agree with on most things, those who I agree with less, that the board does remain committed to working with our leadership team to stabilize the district and ensure that dollars remain in the classroom as much as possible. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. As you saw, we did not take a vote on this budget tonight. The items here were just for informational purposes, but we will be voting on them at the meeting next week. And I welcome any feedback that you have next week at the meeting during our citizens' comments as well. Thank you all again, and have a good night. So that's the last item on the agenda is 336.24, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Support.
Okay. All in favor?